Hello everyone, thank you so much for coming. I'm John Paul from Cannes. Today we're going to talk about foster care recruitment. We have Dominic Ridley-Moy with us, an expert in behaviour change, and he'll be going through some of the elements of behaviour change theory that are applicable in foster care recruitment. And then I'll be taking you through some of the applied elements of foster care recruitment and behaviour change theory using programmatic advertising. Without further ado, I will hand over to Dominic Ridley-Moy, who for the next 5 minutes will be telling you about the relevant elements of behaviour change theory.
John Paul. I'm just going to talk a little bit about behaviour change theory. So I work with organisations to help apply behaviour change theory and techniques. I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the theory you can apply to foster care recruitment. So there's loads of different models out there. I won't go through them now, just Google them in your own time. But I work with organisations. I've got my own model, the Behaviour Examine Solve Test one, to help organisations plan campaigns. But if you haven't come across the EAST model or the COM-B model, they're really useful models developed by the Behavioural Insights team in UCL to think about how you can, I suppose, look at what is essentially on the surface unpredictable human behaviour and bring predictability to it. So it's really useful for that kind of thing. So just going to say a little bit about messaging. So when you're planning foster care recruitment campaigns, there's a lot of research out there about what works well and what doesn't work as well. So the one thing I want to kind of leave with you is that how you frame the message can have a really big impact on how successful your campaign is. So whether you're recruiting a foster carer, teachers, police officers, whatever sort of campaign you're running, because people can be quite unpredictable, sometimes the most obvious things may not necessarily work. So here you've got an example emphasising the social benefits, and often what actually happens in reality is that this attracts fewer applicants than an advert basically emphasising the more challenging dimensions of the role, which is quite interesting. But what I'd say, and you'll hear from John Paul in a second, is that test different things. Don't be afraid to try different messages, and programmatic's really good at that. And also doing things like the foot in the door technique is really useful. So where charities start off by asking you to pledge your support and then ask for you to donate money and more money, that kind of foot in the door technique is really useful. And for foster care, in asking someone to support a campaign and then carrying on with bigger asks is really useful. So just a little bit about the messenger effect. So as we all know, the person who delivers the message, so what graphic you use, how you illustrate it in your campaign is really important, and often community figures rather than politicians can be much better messengers, but also sometimes it's messengers that you've not necessarily considered. So I'm doing a campaign with John Paul on vaccination, and all the graphic that works better than all the others is the picture of someone on a beach on holiday tapping into that desire of this is what's going to be like after coronavirus, because clearly we're all looking forward to going on holiday, and that's much more effective than videos or graphics of local doctors or nurses talking about vaccination. So a good example of thinking a bit outside the box in who delivers your message, and just try different things. So this is probably the most important slide that I want to share with you when you're thinking about foster care recruitment. Really think about the decision-making context, because you don't make the decision to become a foster carer overnight. It's a slow decision-making process. It takes a lot of time. There's repeated engagement over a long period. So you've got to engage with people continually. And it needs to be made as easy as possible. So rather than just thinking about the campaign, there's lots of other things to consider when you're putting together a whole sort of comms package. So there's many reasons why people get turned off from becoming a foster carer. It's not just the role itself. Things like a long and unwieldy application process can make a big difference. So just making that process as easy as possible. So doing things like saying this form will take 10 minutes to complete, so people will know it doesn't take long to complete. Off asking that, say to people, we can help fill it in, chunking it up into small, easy to do steps. So fill in a bit now, a bit later, a bit another day. That makes a really big difference. Also things like scheduling training for foster carers in the evening, weekends. And there's a really good example of I think a campaign to encourage people to sign up to be Army reservists, where they did a kind of day in the life of an Army reservist, and that doubled the number of people completing their applications. So demonstrating what it's like to be a foster carer is a big motivator and will make a massive difference. And then finally, I've done lots of work, lots of trials around personalising calls to action. So it's that kind of thing where you get an email or a text message or a handwritten message with your name in it. It makes such a massive difference to uptake. So do try that, and do run experiments, and also think about if you're sending things out in envelopes. Envelopes often get overlooked, and I've done lots of trials where we've tried things like handwritten envelopes, post-it note messages on them, all kinds of things, where the more you personalize it, the more it looks less official, the more people are willing to engage it. But even putting the council logo on versus no logo can make a huge difference. Obviously, it doesn't work so much for social media, which is much more about segmentation, but John Paul's going to go into that in a bit more, I would imagine. So that's a very quick whistle-stop tour of some of the things you can do. But if you do want to get in touch for a virtual chat and coffee, I'm always willing to talk about all things behaviour change. And now I'm going to hand back to John Paul.
Yeah, we found working on a number of campaigns, a lot of elements there that are applicable. We've also found that a third party can be quite useful if you know you have a particularly clunky form or element of your experience with potential foster carers that external advice on. Dominic is great to bring in and give that theory, but then also apply it and measure it against your own experience. I'm going to, in the spirit of these things, move on very quickly to sharing the sort of applied programmatic bits. And I want to just tell people about a bit about how programmatic works, but what we're seeing are the sort of core essentials when running foster care recruitment campaigns. So I'm going to talk about the funnel and programmatic elements to the funnel, how programmatic advertising works is evolving, and what you need to be thinking about maybe for the future. One of those things is audience building. Probably the most important thing is audience building, and to get a sense of general rates of media investment across the segment. So you will have seen these funnels before, but I think the fostering funnel is particularly different to many other sorts of funnels, because the period between awareness and taking action can be so long, and this is where the energy, we believe, really needs to be spent on the remarketing element. So once someone has expressed some sort of interest, remarket them with a rich plethora of foster carer testament videos, myth-busting creatives, understanding the application process. One thing that stood out from Dominic's early presentation was around the kind of the real warts and all information that can be given to people about the application process and maybe how intrusive that is, but also about what the day-to-day is like. That can help you nudge the right kinds of people towards action. We often see funnels with maybe 6,000, 10,000 people who've interacted with the campaign, but only the slightest, a small number dropping out the bottom. So spending a lot of time and energy on remarketing is a really strong recommendation, and have lots and lots of different messages that will take people from awareness to real active consideration, prompts to how to have the conversation with your partner, for example. And then you move also mixed in with remarketing in the calls to action. Giving people timely opportunities to engage with your live events, to make an inquiry and so on. My recommendation to anybody on this call is, if you do only two things this year, in terms of marketing investment, have always on search and always on remarketing, and spend a lot of time and energy on that remarketing. If you had those two lines running all the time, your prospecting activity can come in and come out as and when you like, but the most effective, 10 times more effective than normal prospecting activity, is that combination of search and remarketing always on. That was just the slide making the point that I was just saying, but the proportion of your budget that is spent on this is actually quite small, but it is something that should definitely be there, a bit like merchandising in a shop. I wanted to talk a little bit about programmatic. We speak to lots of people who do Facebook boosted posts. That works really, really well, but there's a lot more to digital media buying that can really help increase the quality of the people that come through to you. Basic programmatic intro used to do individual buys and sells like you do with out of home or with radio. Now you can bid for the opportunity to place your ad in front of anybody online. So what you do is you use this audience data layer to say, for example, give me geo Warwickshire, demo 35 to 55-year-old females, interest. You can add in pioneer data from Experian, but you can also target people who are reading articles about their children going to university. So the ability to prospect really efficiently has never been so strong. However, this data infrastructure layer is going to start to disappear. As Chrome stops supporting third-party cookies next year, the move really has to be towards you building your own audiences. So that's first-party audiences on your site. Anyone that interacts with the fostering pages on your site should have a little suite of pixels placed on their devices, assuming they consent, which enables you to then remarket to them on any platform over time as they look at news, as they look at social, as they look at information platforms elsewhere, YouTube and so on. We know some of the pains that foster care teams have to go through with their web teams in terms of getting this set up. We have cracked it. So we have consent management platform, we have the pixels, and we're able to give DPIA references to any data protection officer. So if you need help getting that remarketed thing set up, we've been through it many times and can help. We haven't encountered an objection we couldn't handle with that system as well. So absolutely core strategy is audience building. The idea being that anyone that lands on your site becomes part of an audience that you can then remarket to. And this is the other part of audience. Another part that some of you may work in is around social care recruitment. People who express interest in social care recruitment tend to make very good foster care recruitment potentials as well. So as you recruit for children's social workers, some adult social workers, volunteering and so on, you can be also building those audiences and then remarketing your foster care offering to those groups. This is another way that we found is incredibly effective. So search, always on remarketing, and then audience building and sharing between like-minded campaigns. Just to give you a sense of how marketing budgets are being invested in advertising, when we started running this service, programmatic accounted for about a quarter of all spend and hadn't quite overtaken TV now. Globally, over 50% of marketing budgets are now going into this sort of channel. And so it doesn't have to lead what you do, and it's not about getting rid of offline channels, but it's making sure programmatic is a constant part of anything you do. I just wanted to very quickly show you some of the sorts of reporting that you can do. When you're running these kinds of campaigns, you can see in real time what search criteria, what adverts are working best, and also run surveys very quickly against your audience to help qualify them and identify where their concerns might be. We're applying this, yes, to fostering, but also to social care recruitment. There's a lot going on around vaccine hesitancy at the moment that Dominic alluded to earlier. But the ability to see in real time what messages are resonating with people and to take that back to other places is really useful in helping optimize your offline channels. Thank you so much for attending. We will be sharing all of these resources with you straight after. Please enjoy the rest of your lunch break.